Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to another edition of Pray on This. I'm your host, John Pray. Before you get asking, yes, the three things that are obvious. First of all, at 53, I still get acne, and it seems to pop up between my eyes, right between my eyebrows. And yes, there was one there yesterday. That's the result. Um, Two, yeah, the suit and tie. Well, it's kind of a week off for politicians, and therefore I've taken the week off basically as well. Spent the week in jeans and sweats, and I have not been seeking out the razor. And three, why am I not wearing green on St. Patrick's Day? Well, I'm not Irish, but my wife is, so that's Irish enough for me. As I said, I took the week off and, just read some papers, watched some YouTube videos, checked out Facebook, other social media, just to get a general sense of where society is right now. The fact of the matter is that at times when you do what I do, you can be in a bubble and not really paying attention. And what I have seen is that the left wing is just freaking out. They're losing their minds. MSNBC, television shows like The View, the CBC in Canada, they're just losing their minds. They can't fathom that Biden's being questioned in the states in terms of his competency to continue on as president, whether or not he should run in 2024, uh, who could possibly replace him, and even when Democrats themselves look at the vice president Kamala Harris and say it's not her, the left wing, the hardcore left wing like MSNBC and The View, they do everything they can to defend it. Also on the culture war, um, you know, you could say what you want, but statistically speaking, the uh, the greatest generation that ever lived, Joe Biden's generation, the LGBTQ community was less than 1%. Baby boomers is 2%. My generation, Gen X, comes in around 4.5. My children's generation, the millennials, they're 9.8. And then all of a sudden, there's just this explosion in my grandchildren's generation, the Zoomers, up to over 20%. And you can't question that either. The left wing just loses it if you question that. Um, but, when you have people who have achieved celebrity status, a Heather Dubrow. I guess she's part of the Real Housewives of Orange County. Now, I take great pride in saying I've never watched any single Real Housewife show in any of the multiple variations they've come out as. But this woman has four children. Her oldest son is straight, but her three daughters are all members of the LGBTQAI plus uh, group of people. And I just sat back and did a little minor calculation. I'm not a mathematician by any sort, but I can do numbers. And the statistical possibility of having one of your four children have a different sexual orientation than the norm is actually about 8%, even if you have four kids. The less kids you have, the, the less likely it is that you will have a member of that identifiable group. To have three, it's statistically impossible. And then that made me take a look to see, what the population is. And yes, amongst this new generation of Zoomers, it runs about 20% of people who identify as part of this identifiable group of people. But when you really take a look regionally in places like California in the States or Toronto in Canada, they're running between 18 and 22%. But when you take a look at other places like Ohio or, say, Edmonton, Alberta, which is pretty liberal when you compare it to the rest of Alberta, it runs about 5. Now, you got to ask yourself, is this because places like Edmonton, Alberta, or Youngstown, Ohio are shaming them and putting them down? Or is this because places like California and Toronto are actually encouraging people who are just a little bit different to say that they're part of this group as a way for them to fit in instead of them just allowing these kids to find themselves as they are? I think it's more the latter. And we all know that social contagion does happen, but you can't say that about this group. That's wrong. Um, Also, they uh, right now have a really bad opinion of women who fight back against trans women who feel that they should be allowed in all spaces. No, I've asked a lot of my friends, and yes, they're all Gen X. But the fact of the matter is that my wife, her friends, my female friends, none of them seem to have a problem with anybody who has gone down the path to transition to a woman and gone fully, underwent the hormones, learned the mannerisms of females, learned how women talk, how women act, how women speak, how women dress appropriately, try to fit in. But they have a huge problem with this current generation of them that, oh, well, you can look like I do, but put on lipstick and a dress and say, I'm a woman, and you have to automatically be treated that way. No, they're not accepting that. They don't want men masquerading as women invading their spaces. They don't want men playing women's sports. They don't, and I have some bad news for some trans women who feel that actual women are jealous of them. They're not. They're not jealous of you in the least. They're angry at you for invading their space and demanding that everybody validate you and everybody change who they are to make you feel better about yourself. The world doesn't work that way. It never has, and you will find out it never will. And the hardcore lefties like MSNBC, CBC, and The View, well, they're just not accepting the fact that regular, normal minded, silent majority people, whether they be NDP, liberal or conservative in Canada, whether they be Democrat, independent, or Republican in the States, if you are a normal person with a normal grasp of biology and the way the world works, you're not accepting this. I've also seen the defense of Jeffrey Marsh. He wants to talk to children. He identifies as, I'm not sure, transgender, non binary. What I do know is that some days he's clean shaven, some days he's not, but he's always wearing makeup. He's always dressed in women's clothes. And a lot of his TikTok videos start off with, I'm here to talk to the kids. And he wants to only talk to kids. He doesn't want their parents watching this, just the kids. And he invites children to go to his Patreon page where he can talk to them about his life and how he has cut himself off from all of his family. And he's even gone so far as to say, if your family won't accept you, then you're part of my family. Well, there's been parents who are offended by this, and rightly so. A lot of what Jeffrey talks about, um, it's classic abuser behavior. Separate out the weak-minded people who don't know where they fit in, give them a purpose, tell them that you understand them and only you. Separate them from their family and their social safety net so that they're totally dependent on you. I hate to say this, but that's the classic behavior of long-term pedophilia, of long-term pedophiles who have been convicted of the crime. That is the classic way that they do it. And yes, I do know a bit about the subject. I do hold a degree in psychology, and I did take deviant human psychology. It makes me wonder, like, where is all this coming from? And when I really take a look, and I look at our leaders, whether it be Biden in the States, who can't walk up the stairs of Air Force One, should not be allowed to do interviews without having the questions all written down for him ahead of time and the answers written down so he can just read them. Because if that man tries to wing it, he makes absolutely no sense. It's very obvious that Joe is struggling, and when it suggested that maybe we should do a competency test on him. Well, that's really, really shunned. And you're just hateful of the president, and you're a right-wing Republican nut job, and all the rest of it. No, it is people reacting to what they see, and what they see is troubling. And why is the left defending him so hard? Well, it's pretty obvious. They have no other person to replace him. Kamala Harris, the vice president, she seems clueless, um, out of her depth, over her head, even to the point of, I believe it was on Kimmel, they asked her to think about the comedy Veep. And she actually compared herself to the character that Julie Dreyfus portrayed, who was chosen simply because she was a woman, not because she was competent, was completely incompetent in the job, didn't even understand her own job, and thought that her whole reason for being there was just looking good on television. She was rude, a despicable human being, and yeah, definitely not the right person for high office. When you look at Canada, you see the same thing. Our prime minister is clueless, out of his depth, doesn't understand what's going on. For the last 7, 8 months, it's been crisis to crisis. No proper management of that crisis, whether it be the prime minister's own actions or the actions of his ministers. Just a quick recap: he was caught at the Queen's funeral singing and drinking the night before her funeral, making a general ass of himself, which was an embarrassment to this country, whether people want to admit it or not. There is not one, not two, but three of his ministers who have been caught giving contracts to friends or family members, sole source contracts, and being, found guilty of conflict of ethics violations. They hired Lake Maroof and his company, a known anti-Semitic. They hired an anti-Islamophobia guru who she herself has put out a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric and a lot of hateful things towards Canada and our institutions. And then we all know about the Chinese election interference, and first it was there's nothing to see here, I don't know anything about this. Then when it became clear that yes, he had been briefed and he's known about it for a long time, well, I don't know of any individual MPs who received assistance from China. Then it was, well, I don't know anybody who received money from China, but the election interference didn't affect the outcome of the election. Finally, when it really started to tighten around him, it's, I'm going to hire a special rapporteur, and whatever the rapporteur says is what I'm going to do. So in other words, you're going to investigate whether or not you need to investigate this corruption. But maybe it could have worked. Maybe he could have chose a former judge of the King's Court bench in Alberta with no ties to the Liberal Party or to the Ottawa circle of elites. But he hired David Johnston, the former Governor General. Now, this is not an attack against that man's integrity. He is an excellent human being. His credentials are impeccable, and he has integrity. However, he is also a family friend of the Liberal Party, of the Liberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, dating back over 50 years. They were neighbors at the cottage. Justin Trudeau grew up playing with David Johnston's children. He was a close personal friend of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin's father. He sat on the board of directors, actually still does sit on the board of directors of the Trudeau Foundation. He was in charge of the leaders' debates, where he definitely made rulings in Justin Trudeau's favor. To say that he's independent, it's just not true. I don't know why David Johnston, who is a notable legal scholar, would accept the job. because he knows there's a conflict of interest. But it's obvious that our prime minister is oblivious. But our left-wing media here and left-wing supporters here are standing up to save the prime minister's butt. Why? Well, again, much like the United States, who is there to replace Justin? There is no heir apparent. Justin's all they've got. And let's be honest, the Liberal Party is no longer the Liberal Party. It's a cult. I know this from talking with long-term Liberals like Dan Mateague or Stephen LeDrew and Alan Rock. This is not the Liberal Party of the 1990s. This isn't even the Liberal Party of Justin's father. This is a party built around one person, a cult member, and it's a cult of personality. And if you think I'm kidding, if Justin takes a walk in the snow, you'll see the Liberal Party's popularity numbers in the polls drop from the 28 that it's hovering around now down to about 20. Why do I bring all this up? Well, I think that the lack of leadership at the top of our society is the cause of all the symptoms we're seeing below. All of these small radical groups where they are the tail wanting to wag the dog. If the prime minister or the president can get away with being incompetent, useless, and unable to do the job, well, why can't a man shave his legs and call himself she and everybody be okay with that? Why can't a 6'4" swimmer who never did anything above being in the top 200 swimmers in the NCAA, well, why can't they just call themselves a girl after taking female hormones for a year and then destroy all of the female athletes? That's okay, right? If there is a vacuum of common sense power, it's common sense at the top of the power structure that will permeate its way through society. The only thing I know for sure is the winds of change are blowing. We've seen it with some provincial elections. We saw it with some state elections. We saw it with the election of the Senate in the Netherlands, where the Farmers Populist Party, who ran on just stopping the prime minister from stopping farming in Holland, become the most dominant party in their Senate. And when I take a look at the polls, I don't think that it's surprising that the Conservatives since September have been leading the polls. There's been a few outliers and the odd poll where, the Liberals have been closer ahead by one, but it's been pretty consistent that Poilievre has been the choice and that it's growing. There's a reason why. Society as a whole is sick of the malaise which is going on, the lack of leadership, the lack of responsibility, the lack of common sense. The time has come, if we truly want to see our societies achieve the greatness that they have in the past, for us to put aside this woke, based on feelings agendas and go back to common sense and move forward with common sense for the good of all people, not just the good of a special interest group. That's my feelings, and that, as always, is Pray on This. Once again, hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on your notifications. I'll see you at least 2, maybe 3 times next week. I'm off to see Hamilton tonight. So I'm hoping I enjoy the show, and whatever you choose to do this weekend, I hope you enjoy it as well. Have a great weekend.